Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. So here's a question a lot of you have. Are there always red flags in relationships that just may not work for us? That's the question, because everyone's like, red flags, identify the red flags and it'll all be good, right? Are there always red flags, or is it ever possible that it's not all about the red flags, it's just that a relationship just doesn't feel good to us? We want there to be red flags, right? We want things we can hang our hat on. Say clearly, there it is, there it is. That's the red flag, that's the problem, that's the issue. Then we can articulate it. Look back and say, yep, they came late, they drove too fast, they got drunk the first time they met my parents, they interrupted me on the first date, they're always on their phone, they were really entitled in the restaurant, it takes them 5 days to return some text messages, they kept trying to brag and be better than my friend's boyfriend, they made fun of my shoes. Listen, you may have even justified the red flags at the time, but when you talk about it later, hell, even if we don't love it as it's happening, there's a certain relief. These red flags feel concrete and real. The problem is that there aren't always red flags. Sometimes it's fuzzier. Sometimes you just don't like someone. It's nothing you can put a finger on. You may even think like, you know what, this person was on time. They were kind of respectful. They asked decent questions. They were not rude to the waiter. They were nice enough to my friends. It's none of that. It just doesn't feel right. That scenario is actually harder, it's more difficult for many survivors of narcissistic abuse to navigate. Red flags, that feels legitimate. Yep, yeah, got it, makes sense, in my face. Something I can see, I can discern, I can disengage, and I have reasons, and I can say them out loud to myself, and that's great. The problem is that sometimes it just isn't, they aren't there. The red flags are often more behavioral, stuff you can observe, and stuff that, yes, we probably should have picked up the first time or the first month or the first year. But no one teaches us this stuff. But I just don't like this, I'm not comfortable with this person, that could happen upon meeting a new possible friend or at a job interview or a first date. For survivors of narcissistic abuse, this can be challenging. We want substantive red flags, not something hazy that we should listen to in our body that tells us to slow down. I know some of you may be listening to this and saying, well, Dr. Ramani, you're kind of being mean. Maybe you meet someone and they're having an off day, or they're shy, or they're from a different culture. That's all true. I'm not saying like the first time you're like, don't like you, and you cut and run. I am saying that the thing that's hard for survivors is to listen to ourselves. Then not listening to ourselves because we long ago stopped trusting ourselves. That's the challenge here. And what it can mean is that what we do is we keep pushing and pushing through discomfort when we're survivors, but without these hard and fast red flags, like someone screaming at a person on the freeway, we may feel that we need to talk ourselves out of ourselves. Don't. If you feel uncomfortable about a scenario, situation, or person, sit with it. Don't be rude. Don't run away. Don't be abrupt, but sit with it. Don't judge yourself. Recognize that you bring a history to the conversation you're having with this new person, and that things that make us uncomfortable may sometimes be reminiscent of old dynamics that unsettled us. They may be subtle bits of invalidation. It may just be fuzzy, and it may literally be happening at the level of intuition, instinct. I actually had this experience recently. I felt like I was with someone who I actually really like, I thought, and we were dancing different steps and different beats. It was not at all an indictment of the person. It wasn't red flags. But I was depleted after the encounter, and I paid attention to that sense of depletion. I unbraided what I was feeling, and instead of judging myself or the other person, frankly, I saw it for what it was. Was this a person I would want to get into a business with? No. Was this a person I would want to travel with? No. Was this a person I would want to see occasionally from time to time and maybe share a few ideas with? Sure, but it wouldn't be a priority for me. Discernment isn't a yes, no, black, white, in or out. It's an assessment of what feels right. All human interactions are a dance, and we can learn to pay attention to what they feel like for us. What makes this so hard, because it feels sort of easy, and yes, some folks out there are able to say, oh, you know what? I wasn't feeling it. I actually think it may be easier to use this mindset with dating than with other kinds of relationships like friendships or workplace stuff. But what makes it hard is the input of other people saying, give it a chance. For survivors of narcissistic abuse, the give it a chance can play on the really entrenched self-doubt, a sort of, who do I think I am, sort of kind of pushing back on this person because it wasn't completely easy or comfortable. Mindfulness means taking a minute to be present with yourself, checking in with yourself, feeling a situation out. How does the situation feel in your body? Are you able to bring your true self into it? So I'll give you a contrast. I recently met someone where my intuition was spot on. I really enjoyed my first conversation with this person. I found myself in my stride. I was comfortable. I was funny. I could tell the difference between those two encounters. And again, there were no red flags with that other person, no clear signs, just me feeling what I felt. The fuzziness is something many survivors talk about. They'll say, yeah, there's no red flags. And I sort of forced myself to make it work. And then after I got over myself, I stayed in it, and then the narcissism and the trauma bonding and all the rest of it happened. So the red flags model doesn't always resonate, but this ephemeral sense of, I'm just not feeling it, that's there. Listen, every day we have to encounter, deal with, work with, talk with people we don't feel great with. That's life. We may need a minute after those encounters to just replete, have to double down to make sure we communicate clearly, may even blame ourselves for these moments. That's not to say that all of these encounters that don't feel good or easy are toxic, not by a long shot, but they become great lessons on how to discern and listen to yourself, to move at a pace and with boundaries that feel good to you, and recognize that you don't always have to make it work with everyone. I'll tell you, those 2 episodes, and they were separated by about a couple months. In the one of them, I actually felt literally, and it wasn't even cold weather, I felt physically cold. I felt very physically rigid. I remember my eyes were more wide open. I almost looked like this. Like if anyone saw me, they'd be like, is there a wind blowing on this woman? But with this other person, when I met them, there was a lot. I was moving. I was almost dancing as I talked to this person. I was laughing. I was throwing my head back. They were actually both really smart, clever, interesting people. What that was about, I don't know. And listen, it was a very interesting lesson to me because after the first encounter, again, perfectly nice person, I was wiped out. After the second person, I was energized. So I think that we can learn a lot from the not glaring red flag situations. It's a way to give ourselves permission to recognize, no, there's not something wrong with me, but there's something about certain situations that brings something out, and to take each of these situations and learn from them. Hope that's helpful, and thanks again.